Did you know that Alexander the Great never lost a single battle in his entire military career? This young king will blow your mind. He conquered most of the known world before turning 33, creating an empire that stretched from Greece to India. But here's the thing, while everyone remembers him as an unstoppable military genius, few know about the bizarre circumstances surrounding his birth, his strange obsessions, and the mysteries that still puzzle historians today. Let's start with his childhood, because honestly, it was anything but normal. Alexander was born in 356 BCE in Pella, the ancient capital of Macedonia. His father, King Philip II, was already a formidable warrior, but his mother, Olympias, was something else entirely. She was intense, mystical, and absolutely convinced that her son was destined for divine greatness. And get this, she told young Alexander that he wasn't just Philip's son. No, she claimed he was actually fathered by Zeus himself. Imagine growing up with your mom constantly reminding you that you're literally a god. Talk about pressure. But Olympias didn't just tell stories. She performed strange rituals and allegedly slept with snakes in her bed, claiming they were sacred creatures of the gods. Philip was apparently terrified of her bedroom because of all the serpents slithering around. Some historians believe she deliberately cultivated this mystical, intimidating image to give her son a supernatural aura. And it worked. Alexander grew up believing he was special, chosen, destined to achieve what no mortal had ever achieved before. Now, here's where it gets even more interesting. Alexander's education was handled by none other than Aristotle, one of history's greatest philosophers. Philip hired Aristotle when Alexander was 13, and for 3 years, the young prince studied everything from philosophy to medicine, from literature to science. But Alexander's favorite subject? The Iliad. He was absolutely obsessed with Homer's epic poem about the Trojan War. He slept with a copy of the Iliad under his pillow every single night, along with a dagger. His hero was Achilles, the greatest warrior of Greek mythology, and Alexander genuinely believed he was descended from Achilles on his mother's side. This kid literally modeled his entire life after a fictional character. But Alexander wasn't just a bookworm. At age 12, he did something that proved he was extraordinary. His father was trying to buy a massive, beautiful horse named Bucephalus, but the animal was wild and uncontrollable. Nobody could ride it, and Philip was about to send it away. Young Alexander noticed something everyone else had missed: the horse was afraid of its own shadow. He turned the horse toward the sun so it couldn't see its shadow, calmed it down, and rode it successfully. Philip was so impressed he reportedly said, "My boy, you must find a kingdom big enough for your ambitions. Macedonia is too small for you." And wow, was he right. However, things got complicated when Alexander was 16. Philip fell in love with another woman and married her, which infuriated Olympias. At the wedding feast, the bride's uncle made a toast hoping for a legitimate heir to the throne, basically implying Alexander wasn't good enough. Alexander threw his cup at the man. Philip drew his sword and charged at his own son, but he was so drunk he tripped and fell. Alexander mocked him, saying, "Here is the man who was preparing to cross from Europe to Asia, and he cannot even cross from one couch to another." Talk about family dysfunction. Alexander and his mother fled Macedonia and didn't return until the uncle apologized. Then, in 336 BCE, everything changed. Philip was assassinated at his daughter's wedding by one of his own bodyguards. Some historians believe Olympias orchestrated the murder, though this has never been proven. Either way, 20-year-old Alexander suddenly became king of Macedonia. And he wasn't about to waste any time. Several Greek city-states thought they could rebel now that Philip was dead. Big mistake. Alexander marched south with his army so quickly that the Greeks were shocked. When Thebes revolted, he made an example of them, destroying the entire city except for the temples and the house of the poet Pindar. He sold 30,000 Thebans into slavery. The message was clear: don't mess with Alexander. But here's what's crazy: despite this brutality, Alexander saw himself as a civilizer, not a destroyer. He genuinely believed he was spreading Greek culture and uniting the world. In 334 BCE, he crossed into Asia with about 40,000 troops to fulfill his father's dream of conquering Persia. And this is where the legendary stories really begin. When he arrived in Troy, he ran naked around Achilles' tomb, laying wreaths and paying homage to his hero. His closest friend, Hephaestion, did the same at the tomb of Achilles' companion Patroclus. Alexander was literally living out his Iliad fantasies. His first major battle against the Persians was at the Granicus River. His generals advised caution, but Alexander? He charged straight into the river with his cavalry, leading from the front like he always did. A Persian nobleman struck him in the head, cracking his helmet, and was about to deliver a killing blow when one of Alexander's companions cut off the Persian's arm. Alexander won the battle and continued his march through Asia Minor, liberating Greek cities from Persian control. Now, here comes one of the most famous stories, the Gordian knot. In the city of Gordium, there was an ancient wagon tied to a post with an incredibly complex knot. Legend said that whoever untied the Gordian knot would become the ruler of all Asia. Alexander examined it, struggled with the impossibly tangled rope, and then had a brilliant realization. The prophecy didn't say how it had to be untied. He drew his sword and sliced right through it with one stroke. Some historians say he actually found the hidden pin and untied it properly, but honestly, the sword story is way better. Either way, he fulfilled the prophecy on his own terms. That's Alexander in a nutshell. If the rules don't work for you, change the rules. In 333 BCE, he faced the Persian king Darius III at the Battle of Issus. Darius had a massive army, but Alexander used brilliant tactics, personally leading a cavalry charge directly at Darius himself. When Darius saw Alexander cutting through his guards, heading straight for him, he panicked and fled. Alexander captured Darius's mother, wife, and children, but treated them with incredible respect and honor. He told Darius's mother, who had mistaken his companion for the king, he too is Alexander. This showed a surprising diplomatic side to the fierce warrior. After Issus, Alexander turned south toward Egypt. The Egyptians, who hated Persian rule, welcomed him as a liberator. The Egyptian priests declared him the son of the god Ammonius Ra, which Alexander totally embraced. Remember, his mom had already told him he was Zeus's son, and in Egyptian religion, Ammonius was basically equivalent to Zeus. So now he had religious confirmation from two different cultures that he was divine. While in Egypt, he founded the city of Alexandria, which would become one of the most important cities in the ancient world. He founded about 20 cities named after himself, but this was the greatest. Then came the decisive battle, Gaugamela in 331 BCE. Darius assembled a truly massive army, possibly numbering over 100,000 men, with war chariots and elephants. Alexander had maybe 50,000 troops. But he used the terrain brilliantly, drew Darius's forces out of position, and once again charged directly at the Persian king. Once again, Darius fled. This time, Alexander pursued him relentlessly. Darius was eventually murdered by his own nobles, who hoped to gain favor with Alexander. But Alexander was furious. He wanted to defeat Darius honorably, not see him betrayed. He gave Darius a royal burial and executed the nobles who killed him. Now Alexander controlled the Persian Empire, but he didn't stop. He pushed further east into Central Asia, fighting in modern-day Afghanistan and Pakistan. But here's where things got weird. Alexander started adopting Persian customs, wearing Persian clothes, and expecting people to perform proskynesis, bowing down before him like he was a god. His Macedonian soldiers hated this. They'd grown up with a king who fought beside them, who shared their hardships. Now he was acting like an Eastern despot. The tension exploded one night during a drunken feast. Alexander's friend Clytus, who had saved his life at Granicus, started criticizing him, saying he was forgetting his Macedonian roots and dishonoring his father's memory. Alexander, also drunk, became enraged. Clytus kept pushing, and Alexander grabbed a spear and killed him. When he sobered up and realized what he'd done, Alexander was devastated. He locked himself in his room for 3 days, refusing to eat, crying over killing his friend. This shows the complex, emotional side of Alexander that often gets forgotten. Despite this tragedy, Alexander pushed on. He crossed into India, where he faced King Porus and his war elephants. Alexander won but was so impressed by Porus's bravery that he let him keep his kingdom and even gave him more territory. But Alexander's army had finally had enough. They'd been marching for years, thousands of miles from home. At the Hyphasis River, they refused to go further. Alexander begged them, even sulked in his tent for 3 days, but they wouldn't budge. For the first time, Alexander had to turn back. The return journey was brutal. Alexander led part of his army through the Gedrosian desert, where thousands died from heat and thirst. Why did he choose this route? Some say to prove he could succeed where even legendary queens had failed. Others say it was poor planning. Either way, it was a disaster that cost more lives than many of his battles. Back in Babylon, Alexander started planning new campaigns. Arabia, Carthage, maybe even Rome. But in 323 BCE, after a prolonged banquet, he developed a fever. For 12 days, he grew progressively worse. His soldiers, hearing he was dying, demanded to see him. In one of history's most touching moments, Alexander, unable to speak, acknowledged each soldier individually as they filed past his deathbed. But here's the craziest part: after Alexander died, his body reportedly didn't decompose. For days, it remained pristine, which his followers took as proof of his divinity. However, modern scholars have proposed a wild theory. What if Alexander wasn't actually dead? What if he had a neurological disorder like Guillain-Barré syndrome that paralyzed him, making him appear dead while he was actually still alive? Imagine being the greatest conqueror in history, conscious but unable to move or speak, while everyone prepares your funeral. Some researchers believe he might have been buried alive, aware of everything happening around him. That's absolutely terrifying. Alexander's empire immediately fractured after his death, divided among his generals. But his legacy? That lasted forever. He spread Greek culture across 3 continents, founded cities that still exist today, and became the standard by which all future conquerors measured themselves. Julius Caesar reportedly wept when he saw a statue of Alexander, feeling he'd accomplished nothing by the same age. Napoleon studied Alexander's campaigns obsessively. So yeah, Alexander the Great, divine or delusional? Military genius or lucky gambler? Civilizer or destroyer? Probably all of the above. His life was a wild ride of ambition, conquest, and absolute belief in his own destiny. And whether he was really Zeus's son or just a kid who believed his mom's stories, he certainly changed the world forever.